from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
Labor Day has come and gone as the CFL gets set for its stretch drive, and the postseason picture, it is really so unclear. The Bombers are the best in the West, but they're all banged up. There are questions at quarterback in BC. The Battle of Alberta is officially underway, and out of nowhere, here come those Tiger Cats. This is the CFL This Week. Thank you so much for joining us on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Well, folks, welcome to the weekly 3-Down podcast with the best broadcasters, analysts, and columnists. This week, as good as ever, as we say hi to a Canadian Football Hall of Famer, the voice of the Stampeders on QR Calgary, Mark Steven. Thanks for joining us, partner.
Glad to be here.
At one time, he was the voice of the Tiger Cats. Now he's more of a psychiatrist soothing fans on the fifth quarter. Broadcaster Rick Zamperin. Appreciate your time, partner.
Hey, Bubba. Hey, guys.
Right on. And from a Manitoba sports perspective, he's certainly always in the know. Joey Slattery, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, guys, I tell you, what a Labor Day weekend with the games and just so many storylines. And I'm going to just throw it out with you. I'll start with you, Joey. Based on this week's Labor Day results, which game was the most entertaining for you?
Well, I mean, I want to say that it was, the Saskatchewan-Winnipeg one, but for me, it was really Hamilton and Toronto. I just felt there was so much on the line there with, Hamilton having the season that they've had so far. And we know that Labor Day Classic games are always the one that it doesn't matter what the record is, but it kind of makes things a little more interesting now with that win. And the other thing, too, is just seeing how Chad Kelly would, come back into the fold with the Argonauts and build that momentum. And he has seemed to pick up a little bit, but the Ticats playing at home on Labor Day is just something to watch. We always hear about that, especially out here in the prairies, that Saskatchewan Bombers rivalry is always, lives up to the hype. But, there's that one out in Ontario that to me just is always that kind of just under the fold. I think out here, we all understand it in the West and how big it is. But when you watch it on TV and just to see that fandom, at Tim Hortons Field, and to see those two fan bases who clearly don't like each other, to see a sellout at Tim Hortons Field was great too. But it came down to the wire, right? It seemed like a few times that, hey, maybe this isn't going to work out. And, the Argonauts are just going to come in here and stomp the Ticats right out of the 24 season. But the Ticats giving themselves some light here. So I thought that game was just so entertaining. Bo Levi Mitchell, I mean, come on, man. I mean, this guy is Mr. Labor Day Classic, 7-0. There's just so many great storylines there. And I'd have to say that one for me was the most entertaining and kind of sets up for a little bit more of an entertaining second half of the season here.
Rick?
You know what? I'll echo Joey's comments, but I'm going to go with the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan game. And very similar to what we saw at Tim Hortons Field, where one team kind of burst out to an early lead, had a big halftime lead, and then kind of hung on at the end. And I think, given the Banjo Bowl coming up this weekend, in the rematch, there's going to be a lot of bad blood in that one for sure. Winnipeg starting the season 0-4. They're now 6-2 in their last 8 games. First place in the West. I mean, holy Mackinac. This obviously was a game that was played in Saskatchewan. Winning on the road on Labor Day is so tough. Kudos to Mike O'Shea. And obviously some question marks on the injury front, which I know we're going to get to later on. But I give full marks to the Blue Bombers going into hostile territory in what was a huge game, now in first place in the West. Give me Winnipeg, Saskatchewan for the most entertaining game this weekend.
Mark, the Bombers and Riders, they didn't want the game to end.
I know that. It was tremendous. A very enjoyable game. It was really a good game. Two teams just went right to the wire, the onside kick, everything. It was just really dramatic. I only caught excerpts a little bit because we were prepping for the second game on Labor Day of the Hamilton-Toronto game, but what I did see looked fantastic. A great environment and a great game between two rivals laying it all at the line there, but I guess I'd have to go with the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan game as the game of the weekend, although both were really good.
Joey, for us people out in the East, can you explain to me what is going on between Winnipeg and Regina? Like, what is the grind between the two? I can understand, Calgary and Alberta, Calgary and Edmonton and Toronto and Hamilton. It's a provincial sort of thing, but the Battle of the Prairies is something else to be beholden.
Well, having lived and worked and covered both teams in those cities, I've lived it from both ends. And I can say it is as intense, maybe even more so than advertised. You really do have to experience it, right? You have to be there to see it, I think, to fully understand it. But you look at these two cities, I mean, they are the only cities well, I shouldn't say that for Saskatchewan, there's Saskatoon as well, but in Manitoba, I mean, most of the population in Manitoba lives in Winnipeg, right? So the whole province rallies around Winnipeg, and it's the same thing in Saskatchewan. Both provinces are very similar. I mean, the people are very similar. You know, it's the same kind of economies out here. You know, people are very similar, but still very different. There's a Manitoban pride and there's a Saskatchewan pride. And when you put those two together and they go head to head, there is a whole lot of pride on the line that I don't even know if I can put into words, but it's real. And, you know, your summers kind of revolve around these teams, right? When the teams are doing well, it's a great summer for everybody. If your team's not doing well, it is a long and could be very boring, maybe even angry summer. So when these teams get together, you know, the back-to-back weeks, and it also makes up such a big part of September, really, right? It starts off with that game in Saskatchewan, and then we have the Banjo Bowl the week after. So for 2 straight weeks, you're only talking about that matchup, really, and you can really say 3 straight weeks, you know, going into the lead up to it as well. So it's it really does have this, I don't know how you'd put it, but this intensity to it, I guess. You know, it's a friendly rivalry in terms of the people, you know, people in Saskatchewan like people in Manitoba and vice versa, except when it comes to football. There's a fun hatred there, and if you lose, you got to put up with with everybody talking smack for the next little bit, right? So the beauty of this series particularly is there's a redemption week, much like in Alberta, right? The losing team has a chance the very next week to try and get to even that score, if you will. But it's hard when you lose that game at home and then having to go the next week on the road and have to win that one. But there's also a lot more, I think, motivation to win that one on the road after you get smacked at home for sure.
You know, Mark, it's crazy to me, and we'll talk about Calgary and Edmonton on a macro in a little bit, but that I didn't know that the Elks had been so unsuccessful at McMahon on Labor Day.
Yeah, no, they haven't had much success there, and you know I think it's reflective. They haven't been particularly successful since winning the Grey Cup in 2015. So yeah, that's carried on at McMahon Stadium. The Stampeders have kind of had their way at McMahon Stadium on the Labor Day game, and you know just a reflection of what's going on with the two teams. But certainly, it's been exciting for Stampeder fans to come to the stadium on Labor Day.
Rick, we talk about the fans in the stands and what was going on at Tim Hortons Field from, you know, really about an hour before kickoff right through to the game. That was a really live crowd.
It, you know, Labor Day is a special place in Hamilton because it's tailgating at, you know, the AM hours up until kickoff. And whether that kickoff was, you know, the traditional 1 p.m. back in the day or, you know, the 6:30 that they tried out a year or two ago and now 2:30, I thought. Yeah, 2:30 I think is a pretty good start time. I'd love the 1 o'clock, but I understand the TV portion of it. But the fandom in Hamilton is huge, especially on Labor Day. And we've heard this so many times, and it's probably echoed in places like Calgary and maybe to a certain extent Saskatchewan as well. If you don't win any game but Labor Day, fans are happy, at least on that day. But for Hamilton, the fans brought it. I mean, there was an energy in the stadium. I think the players, especially on defense, kind of fed off that. And, it showed on the scoreboard early on. It was 24-3 at one point in the ball game. Hamilton really fed off the crowd. And I think for the first time in a long time at Tim Hortons Field, especially this season, that there was a great give and take between the team on the field and, you know, the fans in the stands. So it was great to see sold out crowd, 25,291, boisterous. There was a lot of Argos fans there as well. You know, the Chad Kelly factor as well. First time since his suspension that he's back in Hamilton on Labor Day. Bo Levi's first ever Labor Day game in a black and gold uniform. Still a perfect 7-0 for Bo. And we saw, some of the new wrinkles in offense and defense that this coaching staff has installed over the last number of weeks. I think the fans were pleasantly surprised and somewhat pleased that it turned out with a big W.
Rick, I'm going to go right back to you for the next one here. This Ticats defense, Chris Jones, say what you want about what he did in Edmonton, and I know it's a very small sample size, but this is a completely different defense.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some work to do for sure. It's not a perfect scenario, but they have shown some improvement. Mark Washington for years had a great elite defense in Hamilton when you had the likes of Simone Lawrence and Ted Laurent and so many other amazing players that really fit into his system. And it was, top three for a number of years. This year, with all the changes, it just didn't work out. Hamilton needed to make a change. Mark's an awesome guy. He's going to land somewhere and make an impact there, no doubt about that. But Chris Jones, he's been successful as a defensive coordinator. I know he's now a senior defensive assistant, but still pushing all the right buttons, getting the most out of the players on the field. And, a number of guys that I've spoken to have basically said nothing's really changed schematically. It's the simplification of the process and the trust that the teammates have with one another. They're getting a little healthier on defense. Guys are coming back like Katsantonis. I think they're getting a little more production out of the D-line, which, helps the other two levels of the defense. And Chris Jones has just, added some energy. Now, how long is that sustainable for? That's going to be a good question because they have some good tests coming down the line. After this bye week, Ottawa at home is going to be a good test. They got Toronto again. Big teams coming down in the last number of weeks. It's going to be interesting to see how this defense does.
Joe, you talked about it too. They look. It is. Again, small sample size, but there's a spirit. They're getting sacks and interceptions, which they weren't doing. Bo was throwing the ball all over the place on Monday. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say playoffs, but this team, I just said, might be making things interesting.
It's interesting. I'll leave it at that for now. I think it's a bit of a steep hill to climb. And even when you look at the success bringing Chris Jones in, I mean, could it have gotten any worse, really, for both of them? I mean, he's coming from an Edmonton situation that was just kind of a tire fire from the moment he kind of got in there. And then you come over here to a defense that's been struggling. The energy's there. It's been a couple of games. Things look good. As Rick said, there's a couple of tests coming down. I mean, if you win the next two, particularly against Ottawa and Toronto, well, that really makes things interesting because now you're climbing up and making this, right in the meat of the playoff push. But it's kind of playoff mode for the Ticats now if they want to get in the playoffs. It kind of feels like every game's going to be a must win from here on in. And if they can carry that energy from the Labor Day Classic, which again, huge game, it could change your season and really kind of put things in perspective of just, how close things are and how quickly momentum can be built. But can it be carried? And that's what I'm interested to see with the Ticats. Yes, Bo Levi Mitchell, man, he's a gunslinger, right? I mean, here's a guy that offensively, you've got one of the more gifted quarterbacks, one of the greatest quarterbacks to play in the CFL. You want to give him the best chance to win. And defensively, if you can keep the teams out of your end zone and even better, keep those field goals away as well and let him do his thing, a lot of great things can happen. But I kind of feel like, Bubba, that this is more of a season building into next year. I think now it's just a matter of getting everything into place, starting to build some momentum. And if the Ticats do miss the playoffs, I don't think it's terrible as long as you're trending in the right direction.
Mark, if there is a couple of wins there for the Tiger Cats, this crossover stuff with the West and the East, it might get wild.
Oh, I agree there. There's so much at play. I mean, it's particularly in the West, every single game, the lens and the perspective changes. If this team wins, it affects this team, tiebreakers and stuff like that. So, yes, the West can sort itself out, and then maybe the crossover does come into effect. I wouldn't have thought that a couple of weeks ago, but it certainly could. And truthfully, while there are teams that don't have great records and haven't played well, I don't think anybody can be just written off right now because the right combination of wins with the right combination of losses by other rivals can change things pretty quickly.
Mark, right back to you for this one here. And I think just only because Calgary to me seems to be the only one that's stable right now with one quarterback. But, I mean, we're hearing that Vernon Adams could be ready for this week. That means there's going to be two quarterbacks that are kind of like a tandem that could be available there. Streveler and, of course, Caleros if he comes back. You got Patterson, who's won games, and Harris. Masoli's won a game, and, of course, there's Drew Brown, Taylor Powell, and Bo Levi Mitchell. There are the Davis Alexander, he's won games. He's won 3 games. And, of course, Cody Fajardo. There are some people that believe he's actually a better quarterback than Fajardo. Who has the best 1-2 punch at quarterback?
Don't forget Edmonton either. I think
Edmonton, what am I thinking?
Played his way right into the conversation as well. Great question about who has the best combination. I guess since they're on top and have done more than anybody else, you'd have to say the Montreal combination is the best, right? I know Caleros is a tremendous quarterback, but I think Stravler is a little more limited as a runner. But I think Caleros and Davis, their skills kind of complement each other. So I'd probably have to go there with the best combination. Although, if in BC, Vernon Adams can bounce back to what he was and continuing to play at the high level, Rourke will have to wait and see there. But right now, I'd have to say Montreal.
Rick?
Yeah, you know what? If this question was, which quarterback tandem would you take to start a franchise? I mean, hands down, it's the BC Lions, right? Nathan Rourke and Vernon Adams. If one goes down or one struggles, that is truly a 1A minus, I guess, to me. I mean, they're so close. They're so dynamic. They're so explosive. Of course, they got some amazing weapons in BC as well that they feed off. If that offensive line was improved, this team would be scoring 40 points a game. No questions about it. Vernon Adams is a starter on any team in the league. And, Rourke the same. When you go down the list, when you get to maybe Edmonton with McLeod Bethel-Thompson and Trey Ford, I think, they could start, but are they the bona fide starter if they're with Hamilton or with Montreal or even with Saskatchewan? I think there's a debate. If you take Rourke and Vernon Adams and you say, okay, they're free agents, they're probably starting on any team. They're that good. The difficulty is there's only one football. Only one guy is going to be slinging it at a time, but it's an interesting question. And the fact of the matter is virtually every team has a great quarterback. And if that guy goes down, and we've seen it time and time again this season, there are some really quality backups in this league that have, as you mentioned, you rattled off a bunch of names that have won games in this league. We probably weren't saying that a few years ago where a backup came in, you thought, wow, they're really going to struggle. Backups are coming in and they're performing. And that's great from a personnel perspective in terms of the quality of QBs that they're bringing up, the coaching staff and coaching them up and getting them ready to be inserted at a moment's notice. So full check marks across the board for the CFL for, trying to bring in the next wave of young, awesome quarterbacks.
Joe, he's kind of right on that. Like, it was about 2 years ago, we were talking about quarterback play in the CFL being extremely poor. That's not the case any longer.
No, it feels like every quarterback in this league is a starter right at this point. I mean, at the start of the year, if you asked me this question, I probably would have said, Caleros and Stravler without a doubt, just because it was this happy reunion of these two guys that, combined to win that first Grey Cup that kind of started that run of 4 straight Grey Cups. Of course, Stravler went and did the NFL thing, got some experience, and now he's back. If I had I known that Vernon Adams would be teamed up with Nathan Rourke, then for sure I'd be thinking, well, maybe that's the top one. But I'm going to go out. We're saying the best QB tandem right now in this moment, it's McLeod Bethel-Thompson and Trey Ford to me in these last few games. I mean, McLeod Bethel-Thompson had a rough start to this year, and then his starting job's put in jeopardy because Trey Ford, who I still believe is going to be the future of the Edmonton Elks, comes in and starts performing. He had a few wins under his belt. People are calling for Trey Ford to start. He goes down. McLeod Bethel-Thompson has to come in, and he's had 2 stellar games. He's kept this thing rolling, and he had almost 500 yards in passing yesterday against the Stamps. I mean, that is nuts. And now we're going back to this conversation. The last time I was on the show, I was saying, Trey Ford has to get started. You're now, Trey Ford's your guy from here on in. Well, now I have to backtrack on that and thinking, well, you know what? McLeod Bethel-Thompson just threw for nearly 500 yards against a rival team and has really put Edmonton in the thick of this playoff hunt now. I mean, the West is nuts right now. I mean, you look at the Bombers, who are 500, tied with the Lions, and just have that, the season series lead right now. They started the season, 1-4, I think, to start the year. Now they're at the top and, kind of where we would have expected them to be. I don't know, at 6-6, mind you, but nonetheless, this is a wild West right now. And if I had to put my money on the QB tandem at this moment, right now, it's got to be the Edmonton Elks with that tandem. I don't know if they can keep it going. I still think that, that Vernon Adams, Nathan Rourke is pretty dangerous. And Rourke looked really good in Victoria over the weekend. So that could change as well. But in this moment, I have to give my props to the Elks.
Mark, there's not a world where Trey Ford starts next week. against Calgary.
No, I just can't conceive of it. I know Ford was, up till the last couple of weeks, the people's choice in Edmonton, but I'm with you totally. I just don't see how you sit a guy that passed for that kind of yards, was that productive, and really led them to victory. So, as I say, and Trey Ford isn't 100%. He maybe is 100% by Saturday, but nonetheless, give him another week off, because I just don't see how he can go away from McLeod Bethel Thompson.
But what a great problem this turned out to be,
Amazing.
right? I mean, everything 0-7 Elks, we're thinking, oh, here we go again. Edmonton's never going to figure it out. And then the QB controversy works itself out at some point now where you've got a real battle. Yes, Trey Ford's not 100%. And even if he were, I don't think he's starting next week. Why mess with a good thing? But it's weird because they waited so long to put Trey Ford in and kind of give him the reins. And then it kind of was taken away, not to his fault, obviously, but now we're right back to square one. But if this motivation between those two quarterbacks, it seems like a healthy competition at this point. And I think for McLeod Bethel Thompson, it's a real reality check of, yeah, I have to perform if I want to keep this job. Nothing is given here, right? Trey Ford is not your backup. He's the guy on your heels. So this is what makes the Elks dangerous to me. You've got a coaching change. We talked about the energy with Jones going to Hamilton. Well, it seems like the energy shift is happening at Edmonton as well. So if things can keep up and they're pushing each other the right way, I mean, the Elks could be the team that you might want to watch out for as the season winds down.
I was just going to actually say that. I mean, we're halfway through the season and Edmonton's like 3 points out of a playoff spot all of a sudden. And now you have this quarterback controversy with two very different quarterbacks. And whether you play the guy who's hot or the guy of the future, I think they're just going to play the guy who gives them the next chance or the best chance to win the next game. And it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Let me tighten the screws on all three of you a little bit here. I'm going to say right now, last year, we were all kind of maybe unanimous that Drew Brown was the best backup quarterback that was not starting. Rick, who is that guy now?
Best quarterback who's not starting? I'd have to go back to Vernon Adams Jr. I mean, I think he's hands down the best. He's got the best tools as well. We got to look at the team that's with this backup quarterback as well. And Drew Brown last year with Winnipeg going to now Ottawa and really pushing all the right buttons. He's got a bevy of weapons as well. A well-coached team, a nice balanced team. They got a great defense there. Always have had really good special teams with Lewis Ward and now Devontae Dedman running back kicks and punts for TDs. It seems every other week. I'm going back to Vernon Adams Jr. He's such a talented guy, multifaceted, can use his legs, has great vision, his progression's awesome, awesome arm strength. I mean, 10 out of 10 for me.
And then sometimes there's good VA and bad VA. Joey, who do you got? Who's your guy?
I have to go with Vernon Adams Jr. too. I mean, if he's not injured and the things don't happen in the NFL with Nathan Rourke, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, he's definitely your starter. I don't think it's a conversation. It's just a matter of waiting for him to be healthy. But he's a guy that I think any franchise in this league, and there's probably a few even keeping an eye on just what the situation's going to be in BC, and if Vernon Adams has an opportunity to help some other teams out. But you're right. Drew Brown was that guy last year, and he came into Ottawa and he's doing a wonderful job there. Ottawa sitting pretty in second right now in the East. But Vernon Adams Jr., to me, out of all the guys, we talk about these quarterbacks and all of them feel like starters. He's a legitimate one in this league. So I'd have to give it to VA. When he's healthy and he's running, he's one of the best guys in the league.
Unanimous, Mark?
Yeah, unanimous, and Trey Ford second. Pretty hard to argue with Adams, who I believe will be starting in the league somewhere next year. That's just my take on it. We'll see, but I think he'll be starting somewhere next year.
Joey, to you here, because I'm so curious about these Blue Bombers right now that are the best in the West in just a wild, so tight in terms of the standings. And after their, suspect start when everyone was calling them too old and the over-the-hill gang, but they found a way to scrap themselves back to the top spot. But there are guys like Stanley Bryant. We're not sure about the health of Caleros and Big Hill. If they have these, I'm going to call Hall of Fame players out, can they contend and still be a playoff team?
Yeah, I mean, they're still without Dalton Schoen too, right? I mean, it's starting to pile up here for the Bombers for sure. I mean, the one thing about the Bombers is when you look at their run, right? It was 4 Grey Cups, 4 straight runs, but over 5 years because you have that 2020 year. They bounce back like nothing happened in 21. They go back and win another one. They've lost the last two. And then if you consider that one even back in 2021, that was the longest season ever in terms of how far into the year the season went, meaning a shorter off season. These guys have played a ton of football over the last 4 years, or 3 years, particularly going into the fourth year, but it's bound to catch up. They've kind of escaped adversity. Every now and again, throughout the years, one guy would fall for a game or two. They'd lose a guy to a free agency. There was all these questions, but Winnipeg has this ability to really live to that next man up mentality. Of course, it's going to be hard. I don't remember the last time you had that. I mean, Stanley Bryant hadn't missed a game to illness or injury for how many years, right? And so we're not even used to seeing him out of the lineup, to the point where he played through illness, and we saw what happened there. And from the sounds of it, it sounds like he will be back relatively soon. It feels like this was more maybe precautionary in the Saskatchewan game after what happened, but that Big Hill one looked bad. He was supposed to be on the 6-game disabled list, and he came back after one. I know he's a competitor. He's a leader on that defense, but, you worry, did he push it too soon? And, that did not look good. He's a tough guy. And to see him down on the ground like that, grabbing at his leg, it has to be something serious. Kolaris, he keeps taking these dings, right? I mean, how many times do we see him getting pulled out because they want to take a look at it, right? And things like that. So they have to be careful with him too. Age and everything aside, you've got one brain, right? And if there's going to be some issues with that, I mean, he's really got to take care of himself, and they've got to take some time. They do have Streveler, so there's really, to me, no rush to bring him in. Streveler's a fan favorite here too. There's still people that wear those fur coats when it's minus 40 outside with no shirt on underneath, thanks to him at the parade, right? So I think he's got the ability to take him in, but I think more than the skill, you're talking about leaders on this team, right? I mean, these guys all won awards for, in their position just 2 years ago when they basically swept the awards, the CFL awards. I think this would have been back in 22, the one in Regina, the one they lost. I remember us talking, they probably all give up their individual accolades for another Grey Cup, but these guys are literally the best at what they do. And yeah, you're losing the skill, but the other thing that comes with that is they make everybody around them better. That's what makes them special. Now, when you have injuries like this, and I said this, I can't remember if it was behind enemy lines or if this was on the last CFL Weekly, but sometimes when guys go down, it inspires the rest of the team to play for those guys. Those are three incredibly liked guys on that team. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are a very tight-knit team. These guys have been a part of the core since they started winning. They've also led that winning charge. So yes, it's going to be a challenge for these guys. It makes things a little bit murky because as much as they're in first place, they're a 500 football team, right? And this West, as we just talked about earlier, I mean, for all we know, the Elks can end up on top when it's all said and done, right? And they're in last right now. So yes, this is a challenge, but there's a lot going on with the Blue Bombers. I think they have a very cohesive unit, and someone can step up for the time being. The other thing they're playing for that we can't understate here is Mike O'Shea just tied Bud Grant for the most wins by a Bombers coach. Every time you walk in to Princess Auto Stadium, as it's named now, where the Bombers play, there is a big statue of Bud Grant by the main gate as the greatest of all time when it comes to Bombers football. And this weekend, and how poetic would that be to tie it in Saskatchewan against the Riders at the Labor Day Classic, and then take that record outright and be the leader on your own at the Banjo Bowl against the Riders. So there's going to be a sense of inspiration and motivation that you can't, it's literally once in a lifetime, this kind of, when you're playing for your coach as well liked as Mike O'Shea is. So I think they can get through this next game for sure. And then it'll be interesting to see just how bad these injuries are. I think we're all keeping a close eye on the reports coming out of practice, and then the rosters coming out before game day for the Banjo Bowl to see just how dire this situation is. Maybe it's just a game or two. Maybe it's longer term. I don't know. I'm confident the Bombers have guys to step up, but it is going to be more challenging with those guys out of the lineup.
Mark, Joey brings up a great point there. The leadership of the head coach, and yeah, he's not the one executing, but he certainly, I don't know how he does it and what goes on behind closed doors, but Mike O'Shea knows how to motivate.
Oh yeah, I think it's because he's such an elite player. He's physically got a great presence, and you sit down in a room with him, he commands attention right away, and he's had a lot of success through the years. So yeah, I can see why he's so well beloved in Winnipeg, and for that matter, why he's had so much success because he gets it, what the players want, what the players need, and he's kind of one of them in many regards. He's just a little older, but no, he's had a tremendous time with it in Winnipeg, and be fascinating to see him pass Bud Grant.
Rick, if Collaros is a no-go, do you believe in the Strevolution?
Well, it's a much different offense for sure with Chris Streveler under center. We saw that in the later stages of the Labor Day Classic. Now, if Chris knows he's going to be the starter and the coaching staff knows that this is the game plan, they're going to install a game plan that's going to make him successful. They're not going to run the ball 20 times with him at quarterback and throw the ball 5 times. They're going to give him an opportunity to find some success. But if Collaros is out and out long term, let's not forget, Winnipeg's 4 points out of last place, but they're 4 points ahead of last place as well and still into first after starting, 0-4. It's an older team, but, experience goes a long way as well, and especially down the stretch. And I was looking at Winnipeg's schedule down the stretch. They have 6 games to go. The next 3 are super important because it's Saskatchewan, back-to-back against Edmonton, and then they end the season with 3 straight games against East Division opponents. At Hamilton, host Toronto, at Montreal. Whether or not that last game of the season means anything, the next 3 are super important. So if they're not healthy, that is going to damage their playoff positioning. But if I were a betting man, I'd probably put money on this team making the playoffs, but maybe not necessarily winning the division. I suspect Saskatchewan is going to have a bit of a push here. They're not going to continue losing. At least I don't expect them to. I think BC is going to make a bit of a push. Edmonton's certainly surging. Winnipeg's got to maybe just tread water to finish in second, or maybe worst case scenario, third place for them.
All right, Mark, here we go. The pressure's all on you.
Mm-hmm.
Simple question.
Yep.
Who's the best team in Alberta?
Well, today, I guess based on yesterday's results, you have to say Edmonton. They are. They handled the Stampeders very, very well, and they have the momentum. The Stampeders do not. They've lost 3 straight games, and, while they're still certainly in the playoff hunt, the math adds up for it. They've just got to pick it up and hope for a couple of losses because right now they are not trending in the right direction. They lost in Toronto, lost at home to Ottawa, and lost at home to Edmonton. So not a great picture right now, but it can change, but they'd better show that they have the ability to make it change.
Okay, Jake Mayer, what's the deal? Is he trying too hard? Does he not have the tools? Is the offensive play calling not to his liking? What are you seeing there?
Well, first of all, the heat is really on him. I think yesterday, if there are people, he's never been really won over the fan base, but I think there were some that were willing to, give him a chance and hope things work out. But yesterday, 4 interceptions, 3 of them were kind of just questionable as all heck. The pressure's really on. It's the he's done some good things. The stats are pretty good, completion percentage, yardage, but just can't seem to pull the explosive play out or, game-changing plays, momentum-changing plays. They just didn't do that, and it's been kind of a trend. He has a good game and then some games that are decent but not great, and the heat's really on him. Why? Well, some of it is play calling, undoubtedly. Some of it is the fact he doesn't run. But, he's got to seize control of the moment, too. So the heat is really on him, and this will be a very important 7 games for him. His contract is up at the end of the year, and let's just see. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because for all of their issues, and there are a lot, the Stampeders remain in the playoff chase. Not a great spot, but they remain in the playoff chase, so just got to look forward there.
Rick, this question was simple 6 weeks ago. It was simple. Calgary. I don't know. Are we saying the same thing now? Are you saying the same thing?
Not at all. No. Edmonton, what are they? 4-1 in their last 5. Calgary struggling. These are 2 franchises going in the opposite direction. For all the talk about quarterback controversy in Edmonton, at least they're piling up some victories. The defense has played well. They've got some good special teams play. Jarius Jackson has got his team playing motivated football, and they've had some explosive plays, certainly had a lot of them on Labor Day against the Stampeders. When you have 3 receivers over 100 yards, including 1 over 200 yards, you're doing something right. Running the ball effectively. Edmonton's, they're going in the right direction. Calgary, for me, apart from Michelle and Beggleton and maybe to a certain extent Mills, not a lot of explosive players on the Stampeders roster. Certainly not like we have been used to seeing, where this team would put up 30, 35, 40 points with some all-star caliber players. There's been a dearth of talent at those skill positions in terms of having a lot of them in Calgary over the last little while. So I think they're going to continue to struggle. Edmonton going in the right direction. They got a few big games coming up, including the rematch against the Stamps. I'm saying Edmonton right now is the best team in Alberta, and it's not even close.
Yeah, I mean, unanimous there. Edmonton is the best team right now. And, even 6 weeks ago, you probably would have thought, man, Calgary, especially when the Bombers started sliding early, that, hey, maybe this is, a Calgary's year to kind of have a real bounce back. But, Calgary for so long has been this, staple of consistency when it came to, a good football team in the West. It seemed when every other team had a good year followed by a bad year, it was just kind of Calgary just rolling along towards the top. They've gone through some massive changes. I mean, the Bo Levi Mitchell era came to an end, and, Jake Mayer was put in there to be the next guy, but he's just vanilla, right? There's nothing to this guy, whether it's on the field or off the field, that really says anything. Like, this whole team really feels vanilla at this point. It just feels like a team that is not in the mix as much as they're right in the middle of it right now. The way that they're playing and just kind of that feeling you get with the Stampeders, I don't see anything going here. We talked about the best backup quarterbacks and two quarterback tandems. I mean, at one point I was saying, every quarterback feels like a starter. Well, if we went for the starters that most felt like a backup, to me, it's Jake Mayer. Like, he's the guy to me that is the least, productive quarterback right now. I mean, 4 interceptions in a big game at home. I mean, that's just, call it play calling, call it what you will. It's just unacceptable at this point. So for me, it's definitely Edmonton that's trending in the right direction. And, we talked about Vernon Adams. Where does he land next year? Is it Calgary? I mean, right now it looks like they can go for a sure shot starter. And if they can get a guy like Vernon Adams to turn things around, great. Because I think this Mayer experiment is done. It's just, to me, it doesn't move anything. I'd be happy for him to prove me wrong, but there's nothing there right now that shows me that he's a guy that's going to lead the team to a Grey Cup.
Mark, I remember listening to your broadcast. I believe it was a Sunday night home game against Toronto, and you got the Stamps had a lousy first half. And Dave Dickinson did an interview and said something to the fact that, what if these guys don't want to have jobs, basically, just paraphrasing here, if they don't want to have jobs, they better show up, or if they want to have jobs, they better show up in the second half. And Calgary put on an unbelievable second half performance and beat Toronto. And I thought to myself, turning point in the season. Did you think that?
Maybe not. I just thought it was a warning, a very fair warning for guys that weren't performing. I didn't know if it would be a turning point or not, but I just thought it was a very honest reflection of what was going on, that they've got to be better. And if you aren't better, they'll find somebody who is better. But I just thought it was a statement by him, but I didn't sense it was, say, a turning point per se, but it certainly got the message across. I can tell you that 4 times. And, he's going to have to go with the same thing. He said the same thing yesterday. He said, maybe we've got some people that are too comfortable. I don't know what that means exactly. It's tough to bring in and move people at this time of year, but, and a lot of them have guaranteed contracts already because they've played the minimum number of games to vest their contract. So be some money involved too. But there has to be change, just not going in the right direction. What those changes are at this time of year, not sure.
Yeah, it's shocking to me, to be quite honest, because Joey's so correct about Calgary. We all know it. Calgary has been this model of consistency. They're always in the mix, and right now something doesn't feel right to me when I watch this team, or I don't expect them to win games any longer, which is very strange to say about a Stampeder team.
Oh, no question. No, they certainly, I get it. That the heat is on now. Dave Dickinson took a lot of fire on our post-game show as well. I mean, let's remember, he's had many years to coach the team. They won the Grey Cup in 2018. They haven't won a playoff game since. And there's considerable doubt that they'll even make the playoffs this year. They've got to, make some things go right in a short period of time. But, you just look at the big trend. It's not great.
Rick, you said that they've lost a lot of players, like wide receivers, year after year. Now, I don't know. Is that fair that Dickinson is under a little local heat?
Well, I think to a certain extent, this goes back to the player personnel department as well, and scouting departments to looking for, the next crop of talent. But it wasn't that long ago. At this point of the season, we'd be looking at NFL cuts, and CFL teams would be looking at these, former NFL players or guys who didn't make active rosters, and they said, let's try the CFL as opposed to staying on the practice roster. But the money is just so different, especially now with these mega billion-dollar contracts that the NFL is signing with broadcasters and networks like Amazon or streamers like Amazon, that those practice roster spots are a little more lucrative. So it is tougher. Now you throw in, the XFL, USFL merger. There are so many jobs out there, but a lot of players are spoken for or are just staying where they are or want to stick around in the National Football League. And years ago, I think a lot of CFL teams would say, hey, you didn't make the NFL. All right, come to us. But there's so much competition out there that it's harder to do that. So for teams like Calgary and teams like Hamilton, they have to look to within guys on their practice roster, guys on their injured list. Are they going to get healthy? Can we reinsert them in the lineup? The trade deadline is going to come soon. There's probably not a lot of movement on that front. We don't usually see a lot of trades. But at the end of the day, teams are going to have to look to within the roster to find out whether or not guys in their PR or their injured list can actually play and be effective on the active roster.
And that's where I think that, the free agency coming up next year, like to me, Dickinson's not a guy. I think it's a little bit unfair. We've seen what he's done, not only as a coach, but as a player. When he's got elite talent with him, he can go somewhere with it. I think there's still one move to be made. I'm keeping that eye on Vernon Adams, not saying it will happen, but if he gets a quarterback like that can turn things around and play a style that he wants, I think that needs to happen first before you just go outright. I mean, the buck does stop at the coach, right? You can't get rid of the whole team. So there is a very realistic chance that they're going to show him the door just because they need to instill change. But I would like to see one major transaction from a player personnel standpoint before you give him his pink slip, because as soon as he's out that door in Calgary, there'll be a watch on him to see where he lands, because he won't be out of a job for too long, I don't think.
I would just say that there's a lot of frustration here, and you mentioned player personnel, etc. Fans here are kind of tired of stalking the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Toronto Argonauts with players. It seems when free agency hits the last couple of years, it's just a constant stream of players going there. Are they not being as aggressive as they need to be with players? Do they have a philosophy that requires them to, move on? Do they have certain fixed limits on what they pay certain people? It'll have to be re-examined, because you look at both Toronto and Hamilton, they're heavily loaded with Stampeders.
I'm heading to Calgary in 2 weeks for that game against Montreal. I'm really interested to see what the fan base is going to be like there, to experience that atmosphere, because you're right. I mean, for a city, I feel like Winnipeg's in that phase right now. It's been, recency bias. It's a great team and going to all these Grey Cups. To fall from that has to be a hard fall from grace. So, I'm really interested to see what that fan base is like in Calgary after so many good years now, kind of seeing what it's like to be, toiling towards the bottom.
Yeah, no. It's fair. There's a lot of heat. I mean, sort of the narrative that they were operating under this year. They went 4-6 in the first 10 games. Not great, but not awful. Mm-hmm. And for reasons known only to the CFL, they had an 18-day break between games. So they came out and played yesterday, and they played very well. And I think people just said, you had 18 days to organize this kind of a game, and there was a lot of frustration. So, it's we'll see. I'm not going to completely write them off, but I'm not going to be naive or Pollyannish either. They're in a bit of a pickle for sure.
You know what? That was the Elks a few weeks ago. They had a 17 or 18-day break. I think they lost the game right after to go 0-7, and then that's when they started patching things together. So I wonder, after that kind of egg that they laid yesterday, if they can come back around and work in that second game towards, because that's where Edmonton found their success. So that's an interesting point too.
We'll it's a crying shame, because the crowd was outstanding there, Mark. That was a real nice crowd at the old barn there.
It sure was, and they were really hyped up. The atmosphere was great. It was beautiful and sunny outside. It was just everything was there for a great day. The Air Force flyover and everything. Everything was set for a really good day, but the Stamps didn't do their part.
BC and Montreal, Toronto and Ottawa, Sask and Winnipeg, Calgary and Edmonton. Joey, the game of the week is...
All right, I gave the flowers to Toronto and Hamilton for the game of the week last week, and everybody else took the Bombers in Saskatchewan. That's because this is the game I'm most excited for this time around. The Banjo Bowl is an excitement, that is right there with Labor Day. This is Winnipeg's Labor Day Classic, right? It's going to be wild there right now at Princess Auto Stadium. There's so much history on the line. You know, people are wanting to go there to watch Mike O'Shea grab that record and be the all-time winningest coach for the Blue Bombers, surpassing Bud Grant. This is drama that, you know, doesn't come too often. It's a bunch of perfect storms. Yes, there's injuries as well, and that's going to be another storyline. But to me, I'm excited to see how the Bombers respond. I'm excited to see how Saskatchewan responds, knowing, you know, that so many players could be out and that they could ruin a big party in Winnipeg. I think this one is going to be an absolute barn burner. I think this is going to be the most exciting game of the week. And there's something about this game that even if it weren't, and it's a blowout one way or the other, it's still going to be the most interesting game because we're going to dissect the heck out of that when it's all said and done. That's for sure.
Rick?
Well, I'll say this. Odds makers have all 4 games being nail biters. The lines are between 1.5 and 3.5 for all 4 games this season, and 2 games is 2.5. So, yeah. The Banjo Bowl is probably going to be the most electric. I'll say that the Labor Day Alberta edition rematch is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think there could be a Grey Cup preview in BC and Montreal. To me, maybe the most interesting game is Ottawa-Toronto. How do the Red Blacks bounce back against getting blown away in Victoria by the Lions? The Argos are, I think, 3-3 in their last 6 games. Is Chad Kelly and the offense and the defense, are they going to be able to put it all together? Because a win would put them at 7 wins, tied with Ottawa. I know Ottawa has that tie. But this other version of the Battle of Ontario is going to be really intriguing. In Ottawa, this could be a statement game for the Red Blacks. You know, take care of Toronto. They'd be, virtually 2 games up on the Argonauts with, half the season or less than half the season to go. I think this is the game of the week. It's going to be Saturday night, nation's capital. I think it's going to be must-watch TV.
Mark?
Well, I guess if you're strictly neutral and sitting in Kenora, Ontario or somewhere, you'd probably say Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, and didn't have any interest. Obviously, I have more interest in one game than the other. I mean, let's just lay it on the line here. If the Stampeders lose this game, it's a double whammy for a couple of reasons. A, it would bump them to the basement. B, they would lose the season series to Edmonton, and they've already lost the season series to Winnipeg. So it would be kind of a double whammy. It'd be, in effect, 2 wins for Edmonton because, the Stampeders would have to get 2 wins to go by them because they can't tie them in the standings. So obviously I have a different viewpoint, but I understand from a strictly neutral viewpoint, the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan game is probably the marquee game.
Although I don't know if you can call Kenora neutral.
That's true,
pretty much so. The Muskoka, Manitoba. I think that's Bomber country. You might have to go to Thunder Bay.
Sure.
Definitely can't go to North Bay either. That's Mike O'Shea's hometown.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the neutral ground is, but I don't think it's Kenora.
If you're not in a franchise city, I guess they should have said, yeah.
There we go. Timmins, Ontario. Those neutral fans.
Sure.
There we are.
Rick, to your game, it's interesting that you're right. The nation's capital, that fan base has certainly been revived. I'm hearing that from AJ Jakubek. They are so into it right now. And the Argonauts, they've only won 1 game on the road all season.
Yeah, this is a huge game, I think, for both teams. Is Toronto a contender or are they a pretender? They're vastly different, obviously, from last year's 16-2 outfit. Of course, the Chad Kelly suspension plays a huge part in that. But are they a team that can at least contend for second and maybe even first place in the East if they do get on a roll? They certainly have a lot of the same weapons as they did last year. The defense still very good. Again, special teams, a huge part of the Canadian Football League, as we know. They got a great special teams outfit. Can Toronto get on a roll? And I think a lot of Ticats fans are saying, heck no, let's not have that. But Ottawa, too, this is a big game for them. And I think if they win, they put a little bit of pressure on Montreal because how many more games in a row is Montreal going to do? Are they 18-1 in the last 19 games? That stretch can't continue. They're going to, I think, hit a bump in the road. Ottawa with this game can maybe take advantage of that future kind of stumble by the Alouettes. This is a big game for the Red Blacks.
And Joey, this is where I'm going. I mean, I can't believe you guys aren't saying BC and Montreal. I think that is
okay. Yeah,
I think that's the Grey Cup preview right there. Like,
so
it well could be.
That's my runner-up. I mean, you're going the best team in Montreal and a BC team that really seemed to hit its stride last game, right? Nathan Rourke looks right back at home. He's looking comfortable, and he's only going to get stronger with every game. And there's something about Montreal, too, that it feels like at this point kind of when the Bombers started their little run, right? You get a quarterback that's down on his luck, comes into a new team, totally re-energized, a team that's not supposed to do anything and runs its way into a Grey Cup, just as Montreal did last year. No one had them to win that one, and they upset the Bombers, and then they're picking up where they left off this year. So I'm interested to see the Montreal trajectory is, can they keep this going? I mean, yeah, they're going to lose games here and there, but I mean, the way they're going right now, doesn't look like they're ready to slow down. They might have a stinker for sure. But the BC Lions, to me, I mean, it's kind of like we're sleeping on them right now just because of how wild it's been and the crazy stories. But to me, you look at a strong team that's, in their prime. We're not talking about age or anything like that. The BC Lions looked primed this year. And you got to remember, this is a team that keeps getting beat up by the Bombers in the West Final, right? This is probably the year where they're thinking, okay, let's just keep it tight. And then when we get that chance this year, we're going to deliver that knockout punch and punch our ticket to the Grey Cup. They're humming right now. It looked like that last game. I mean, it's a one game, sample size, but we've seen what Rourke's done with this team in the past. He has more experience. He's getting more comfortable. So we'll see where it goes. That to me is going to be the entertaining game in terms of, you're right, just two heavyweights going head to head.
Mark, the home field advantage as we approach the playoff run in the West could be the most important it's ever been.
Totally, because as you say, of the enormous parity that the division has this year. Will it be indoors in Vancouver for a West semifinal or West final game? Could it be outdoors in Winnipeg? What about Saskatchewan? And I get it. It'll be a huge difference because it is so close with so little room, and one loss here, one loss there tips the balance. So yeah, absolutely, the home field is going to be so important because the teams are just so close, and if that's the margin, well, that's the margin. Make it happen.
Let's not forget Vancouver's hosting the Grey Cup this year too. Yes. So there's some added motivation there for the BC Lions to start picking up steam.
You know what the neat thing is, guys? Just all these matchups are outstanding here. But like you said there, Joey, and I think Ricky talked about it too, the fact that there's a kind of a theme to the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan game, this whole Banjo Bowl thing. I mean, was it Troy Westwood that started this?
Yeah, Troy Westwood threw out the Banjo Bowl, making fun of the I can't remember the full quote, but yes, it was basically saying a bunch of rednecks playing the banjo, and we're going to win the Banjo Bowl next week. So,
yeah, because he was like, why on Labor Day? Why do we always have to go there? Like,
yeah. Troy Westwood, a legend in these parts for a big part of that. It turned out to be a trophy. One throwaway line in an interview ends up becoming a full-blown event and a trophy and one of the more marketable events for the CFL. So I think they have a little thank you for him there.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. That's why we love the Canadian Football League. Love your efforts, guys. Great opinions, great conversation. And again, Rick, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, not that I'm a big betting guy, but boy, the lines, you're right. They're that close for these games, and it makes you say that, well, I guess I'll be on the couch for at least 3 hours on each one. Actually, that's right. This is the first week where we don't have a Sunday game, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
and the league is all now Friday and Saturday, except for the Monday Labor Day games, and Montreal has a Thanksgiving Day game. Other than that, it's just Friday, Saturday here on in.
Then you throw in the CTV caveat too, right? Now the games are back on the national network, so that'll be another interesting thing to see how that affects ratings.
Yeah, that's the first. I think this weekend is the first CTV full network games. It just drove me crazy. The TSN would throw all these resources, i.e. Bell Media at the Grey Cup, but couldn't be bothered showing a game on the main network, the Grey Cup. But we did get Buffalo.
It's a great time of the season.
Buffalo.
I was going to say, great time of the season to enhance the exposure, right? The playoff drive is upon us. There's so many great storylines in every single city, whether you're in first place or last place. Superstar players playing at their best. The pressure is going to be on. The weather is going to turn nasty at times. It's going to be a fun stretch drive.
It's been a fun show, guys. Folks, week after week, the Ticats Audio Network is kicking off outstanding CFL contact. If you love the home team, we always go deep with game day and, of course, what's going on pre-game, build up to the week. You want to join us on the Ticats Audio Network, be sure to join us. Guys, Rick, if people want to contact you, of course, and debate some Ticats stuff or whatever, if the fifth quarter is up and running, where can we contact you?
Yeah, Fifth Quarter Show on YouTube. You can just Google that. You can email the show, fifthquartershow@gmail.com, and find me on social media at Rick Zamperin. And let's talk about some more Ticats wins down the stretch here.
Mark? Let's turn things around in Calgary. And of course, if fans want to talk to you, where can they do so?
Best spot is through X. It's at Mark on Football. So always love responding to fans.
Joey?
Yeah, for me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Joey Slattery TV. Same on Instagram, at Joey Slattery TV. That's Slattery with 2 T's, just like flattery, but with an S.
Nice line, Butter. Hey, guys, thank you so much for your time. Hey, guys, thank you so much. And ladies, everyone that's enjoying the CFL this week, enjoy the games this week. Be sure to come back for more conversation with 3 more outstanding co-hosts that will join me on the CFL this week. Until then, enjoy the games and be sure to catch us on the Ticats Audio Network.